Welcome back, everybody, to InterPartyConflict, the show where we answer questions to help you have the best tabletop gaming experience possible. With me, as always, I have Gabe, Master of Dungeons, Editor of Podcasts, and I am Jeff, Player of Video Games and Stealer of Intros. Before we answer any of your questions today, I have one question for Gabe. Gabe, how are you?
I'm pretty good. Wow.
Gabe saw me scribbling some notes earlier, and I was writing out a little intro for him.
Wow. Good job.
Thanks.
Good job, Jeff. I'm pretty good. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Gabe and I went to the Renfest this weekend.
Yes, we did.
Had a pretty good time.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I haven't been in a couple of years, so it's nice to...
I missed it last year, so I had to make sure to go. I had to really buckle down and make sure I went this year.
Yeah, and we mentioned last week that you had your really cool armor.
Yeah.
So, and I got to see our friend Dave. He had some pretty cool armor.
Yeah.
As well.
Oh yeah. Dave's got a good get up. He's got more accessories, but I feel like his is more comfortable because it's not like mine's like hardened leather.
Yeah.
His is more like a it's a big leather jacket, so it's not like the most comfortable thing, but it's yeah.
Yeah, and I remember there was a point where we were just standing around talking, and somebody came up to ask where you got your armor from, and you basically put on a commercial for the store you got it from.
It wasn't I carry like the business cards of the shop that makes the leather that I wear, because like most of what I'm wearing is from one particular shop, and like I kind of like them a lot, so like obvious I do it because I spent a lot of money there.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I carry around their cards, and if anybody ever asks, I always like point them towards them and everything. So,
well, that is pretty cool. Although they should pay you or something.
They did give me a small discount on my last purchase. It was a small item. It wasn't a big discount, but I still appreciate it nonetheless. So,
I guess, yeah.
And it was an item I was not I wasn't even looking for, and I definitely needed. And like she knew exactly what she was like. Come here a minute, and showed it to me, and I was like, oh crap, yes, I need that. But
here's this other thing you need to buy.
Yeah. Well, luckily it wasn't anything too big, because I'm never in there to buy a big thing again, because like I bought all the major pieces I need. Sure. But little trinkets here and there, I'm always I always keep an extra eye out for. So it was definitely like she knows how to get me to buy more things, but but it was something I actively needed. I just wasn't sure what to look for in that thing. I have a little little tobacco pipe that I have as mostly as a prop. I don't smoke too much, but I was carrying it around kind of awkwardly, and it's a nice pipe, and I don't want it to get messed up or anything like that. And so like I just kind of carried it around awkwardly, and like as I was leaving that shop, she stopped me, was like, "Here, let me try something," and she like grabbed the pipe and like put it in this little, it's like a little sheath. She's like, "We made these to hold wands, like a magic wand sort of thing."
Yeah.
But it's just like, but we also found that they make great holders for pipes. I was like, awesome. I'm gonna get this.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah, I just had a pretty good time. I don't have a costume or anything. I do want to come up with a costume for next year, but I'm not gonna make just a traditional a fantasy thing. I want to do something goofy.
Yeah.
Because that's what I do. I thought about, if I had socks to go with it, I thought about maybe coming in like a baseball uniform, because I have a baseball uniform from a play I was in a long time ago.
Right, yeah.
I was in Damn Yankees.
Damn Yankees.
Yeah, so I don't know. I've joked around with with the idea of coming to the Renaissance Festival in like a quote unquote the future costume. So like, because I have a pair of like silver pants and a silver cloak, I could get some like dryer hose tubing and like put on my arms, and maybe have like a random circuit board on my chest or something.
It's definitely not unheard of at the Renfest.
Yeah, but
plenty of people dress up as like Doctor Who and things like that.
Right.
Because like time travel, that whole thing.
But I have a feeling my wife wouldn't want to be around me if I was wearing that kind of a costume. So I don't know. I'll come up with something for next year. All right. Do you want to go ahead and get into the episode?
Sure.
Okay. Now, Jeff, I want you to imagine that your great uncle has just passed away.
Oh.
You live in a fantasy world. This isn't a real life thing, so don't worry. If you have a real great uncle, he's not about to pass away.
Okay.
I hope not. I'll edit this out if not, but rest in peace, Jeff's great uncle. Anyway, so your great uncle Phineas, your great uncle Phineas has passed away.
Okay.
and they're cleaning out his estate. You know, one day you go over there, you're in his study, and you're thinking to yourself, you remember stories that he used to tell all these tall tales when you were a little kid. He would tell you about, he used to be an adventurer, and there's this one time he did this, he did that, whatever.
Yeah, he'd go on and on.
Exactly. You remember one time telling a story about how he swindled a dragon out of its hoard.
Ooh.
You know, and like, you know, of course, your dad would always be like, no, don't listen to him. He doesn't know what he was talking about. But you know, you're in his study and you're fiddling around with just some of his stuff that's sitting there on his desk. I want you to roll a dexterity check.
Okay.
And I'll say you have disadvantage because you're just so distraught over the loss of your great uncle Phineas.
Okay.
Phineas.
Lowest is 5.
Okay. So you're messing around. He has like this little ink well on his desk, and you're messing around with it, and it's an ink bottle. It's not an ink well. It's an ink bottle. You accidentally knock it over. You're like, you're moving it, and then it just fumbles out of your hands, and it slips and falls, and you're like, oh crap! You hear a crash, and you're like, oh no, I just broke my great uncle Phineas's ink bottle. He loved that ink bottle. I don't know, but you get up to go clean it up because you know it's ink. It's going to stain the carpet,
right?
And then you notice
the fantasy carpet,
exactly. You notice that the ink has pooled in a square on the floor.
Okay.
So you go and you move the carpet out of the way, and there is a trap door in front of his desk.
Okay.
What do you do?
I'm gonna see if I can open that trap door.
Okay. You pull on it and it opens.
Ooh.
And then you grab a lantern and you sort of like reach it down in there, and shining back at you, these little flashes of gold and silver.
Gabe, what did I just find?
You just found the dragon's hoard.
Yay!
I should have had it be something else. You find his outhouse or something. I don't know.
Yeah, he had a condition where. Never mind.
Oh, dang it! I just realized I got the name wrong. Doesn't matter. Anyway,
what was the name?
Well, so the item for this week, the item for this week's Dragon's Hoard, is called the Desecrated Hand of Saint Filion.
Filion.
And also, he's not a saint. Your great uncle was not a saint. This is somebody else who happens to have a similar name.
Sure. Okay.
Wow, I got that really bad. I got that totally wrong.
I don't know. It was close enough.
Anyway, so the Desecrated Hand of Saint Filion is a withered hand bearing the symbol of Pelor, the god of light, into the palm. Superimposed over the symbol, however, are necrotic runes scratched by ragged claws. So I guess it makes a lot of sense that this is not your great uncle's hand because it is his hand. He didn't lose his hand. I could have put that into the story earlier, but I didn't.
Oh.
Anyway, so this is a magic item that has 2 charges per short rest. So like you can use it a couple times, and then if you take a rest for an hour, you can use it a couple more times. As a bonus action, you can choose one creature you can see within 30 feet. That creature regains 1d12 minus 1 hit points. So maximum of 11, possibly 0.
Sure.
So you might use this on somebody and they don't gain any hit points.
Right.
However, at the beginning of their next turn, they take 1d4 minus 1 necrotic damage. So you probably heal them for a few hit points, but then you remove a few hit points too. The damage cannot be reduced or negated by resistance or immunity.
Okay.
So with this item, it's possible you might heal them a bunch of hit points and then they maybe lose 1 or 2 hit points. It's also possible you might heal them and then they lose more than they healed.
Right, yeah.
So thematically, I think this is neat. It's an item that maybe at one point healed you. It was like a good, holy artifact. But then, because the darkness or whatever that's been forced upon this item maybe causes you to, lose some hit points more than you got. So I think it's neat. It's kind of, it's like a double-edged sword. It might do something good. It might do something bad. This was actually submitted by Caleb via email. I forgot to mention that at the start. So he mentioned in his email that I think this item is actually based on something from a video game, from The Darkest Dungeon.
Okay.
I haven't played it.
Oh, sure. Okay.
But he did some math on this, and he said that there's a 6.25% chance that it does no healing and deals more damage than it. So like there's a very small chance that it does something bad.
Okay.
there's a pretty big chance, like an 81% chance, that you will gain back more hit points than you lose.
Sure.
And then there's a 12.5% chance that you neither gain nor lose anything.
Okay.
So, like, you know, it's kind of a risky item. Mm-hmm. There is a small chance that it will do something bad, but there's a pretty good chance that it'll do good.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like a lot of the items. There's like the Rod of Wonder, I think, that like when you use it, you roll on a huge chart to see what it does, and like some things are good, some things are bad.
Right, yeah.
There's also the Sorcerer Origin, the Wild Magic.
Yes.
Wild Magic Surge is their ability that like something weird happens whenever they cast a spell or whatever. Mm-hmm. And those sort of things, they might be good, they might be bad. This is kind of similar, but on a much smaller scale.
Sure.
You know, it's a much more simplified thing.
Yeah, it's not like an incredibly powerful item too. So it's a neat item that can easily be put into a low level adventure.
Yeah.
There's some possible story behind it with how did it get tainted, that sort of thing. Like
who was Saint Filion?
Yeah.
It obviously isn't your uncle.
Right, yeah.
I was kind of going for that with the story, but
he would tell stories about how he lost his hand, but he had two hands.
He would be like, "Oh, I lost my hand," and pull out his sleeve and there's no hand. But then like when you're looking the other way, he would like tickle the other side of your shoulder or something. There's my hand.
Or it's like he would say that he lost a hand and be like, "But you have two hands," but he actually has like a third arm he hides that doesn't have a hand.
Yep. And then also maybe he when you were a kid, he used to tell you that he played a game called Dungeons and Dragons where his character he would call himself by his character's name, which was very similar to his own name. This is a very poorly executed reference back to the interview I did with my brother, where my aunt Donna convinced me that she had legally changed her name to Dama because that's what her character's name was.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with this story. So that's the desecrated what?
Gabe, maybe it was his hand, but he also had the hand of Vecna.
Oh, snap. That's how he died. He lost his hand again.
He lost a hand again.
Yeah. So that was the Desecrated Hand of Saint Filion, once again submitted by Caleb via email. If anybody would like to submit items for the Dragon's Hoard or questions or stories for the
funeral pyre.
The funeral pyre. How would they do that, Jeff?
They can send us an email at interpartyconflict@gmail.com.
Awesome. You want to go ahead and get into some questions?
Yeah, let's get going. Our first question comes from Nicholas P. through email. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
What are some tips on running a battle the players are meant to lose or cannot win for story purposes?
Yeah. Do you have any strong opinions about this?
Yeah, kinda. I really don't like battles that you're supposed to lose. You're supposed to lose. And part of this comes from like playing video games and like games that have those sort of situations where it's like, because it's a story thing where you're supposed to lose. It's a little bit easier for me to like reconcile with in a video game, because like they basically force it into the mechanics. Like there's nothing I can do about it. It's just it's a step in the game that I have to take.
Sure.
In something like D&D, it's something that the DM is trying to force on you, but within the rules, or at least the players are told that within the rules you can do anything.
Yeah.
So when you're faced with something that you're supposed to lose for story purposes, like you're gonna want to try and fight that. Like most players don't want to lose, and so they're gonna try to beat this obstacle in any way possible. And so they might exhaust themselves like trying to beat this boss or whatever, and the DM just kind of puts a block up at every turn. And it might get to a point where maybe the player does think of something that the DM didn't think of, and the DM has to like make up something on the spot. Mm-hmm. And that might be more obvious than not that they just made it up, or they're, bending the rules in some way just to make sure that this part of the story stays the way that they want it. And that can create resentment and, things like that. And it can create some conflict, not the good kind.
Not inter-party conflict. Ding. We haven't done the ding in a long time. We've said it. I mean, anyway.
All right. Put a couple dings in right here. Ding, ding, and ding. Okay.
Now, you touched on a good point, and it's that losing isn't fun.
Right.
Before everybody grabs their pitchforks, there are definitely times where the end result of a loss can be fun.
Yeah, it could cause some interesting things to happen.
Right. But the fact that you lost isn't fun.
Right.
It's very hard for a player to be happy with the fact that they lost.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's the result of the dice or a result of the DM having that as his plan all along. Like, it is not fun, or it is inherently less fun to lose than it is to win. Right. I mean, you know, that's how it is in everything.
Sure.
You know, whether you play a sport or whatever, you always shake the other team's hand and say, good game. But if you lost, you had less fun than the other team. You feel worse about yourself than the other team. That's just how people are.
Yeah, you practice your sport so that you can get better at it, so you can win more, because, you know, it's fun to play, but winning is fun. Winning is more fun than losing. Whether or not you're still having a good time losing,
exactly,
it's still going to be more fun when you know that, like, that all that work you put into it paid off.
Yes. You also brought up another good point where, like, you might use up resources that you wouldn't have used otherwise because you were losing.
Sure.
Let's say you have like a one-use magic item that is this really, really powerful thing that's like, I'm only going to use this when I really, really need it. Mm. And then there is what the player doesn't realize is a scripted failure, a scripted loss. They might use that item, and then if the DM doesn't let them have that win because of it, then they will have wasted something.
Yeah.
Because the DM just, for some reason, wanted them to fail.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because, like, it's either you don't know that you're meant to lose it, mm-hmm. and then you end up, like, wasting all this effort trying to win it, and, like, you're worried that if I don't win this, my character might die and I lose all the work that I put into this character.
Yeah.
Shoot, what am I going to do? I have to figure out how to win this. Or it's obvious, or you might know that it's an unscripted, and then it's a scripted event, and that you have to lose, and that kind of that lessens the experience when you know that, because then it's like, okay, this is kind of cheap and cheesy, or
it makes you realize you're playing a game.
Yeah, definitely.
No matter how engrossed you were, you now realize, oh, this is a game. I'm not going to make my character do what he would really do. I'm going to save resources and let myself get beaten.
Yeah. I feel like in some situations, if I understood that this was like a thing that we're not supposed to win, mm-hmm. Depending on what kind of character I was playing, I might try to, like, turn what my character's doing into, like, okay, oh, we can't beat this. All right, so let's find a way to escape or something like that. But not everybody's going to have that, you know, like, have that thought, and, like, sure. Even if they maybe think that they might buckle down into their character and say, no, my character would fight till the death, or, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. In general, I feel like players that I have DM'd for, players I've played with, don't take failure kindly. Mm-hmm. And I very, very, very rarely play with people who are willing to run away.
Sure, yeah.
That is something that players just don't do.
Yeah, it is a rare thing.
It's partly because of, it's not fun to lose, like we said, and partly because I think a lot of players, whether they are right or not, have the attitude of, well, the DM wouldn't throw a challenge at me that I can't overcome. And I mean, whether you should have that attitude or not, that's up for debate. But whether it's justified or not, like, people have that attitude. Mm-hmm. And as much as you may want to say, oh, that's how you feel, well, take this.
Sure.
I don't think that is inherently a good attitude for the DM either. But this all just kind of hinges upon that this is a trope that I think works fine in a movie, works fine in a story or like a book or whatever. But I don't think it works well in any kind of a game where the players have agency. Like, right. Even if you're playing a video game. We all know the games where you're mowing down bad guys left and right, and then suddenly a cutscene happens where two random mooks that you've killed dozens of are there with their guns drawn, and oh no, the main character puts his arms up. There's no way he can get out of this. When you're like, no, I can take like 10 of those shots.
Yeah.
Let me just do that.
Yeah.
Everybody hates that. That is universally frowned upon in the gaming community, yet game designers still do it,
right? Because
they think that what works in a book works in a game. And it doesn't, because in a video game, you know what it's like to be in control of that character. You know what that character can and can't do. Mm-hmm. It's even more magnified in D&D, where it's like, I know how many hit points my character has. I know what my character options are. It's hard for the player to accept that their character would just lose. So they're not going to give up if the DM just tells them you lose.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if the DM just just makes it really, really, really hard for them. I mean, that's a way of doing it too, but that feels even more unfair because then it feels like, I don't know, the DM's just being vindictive or whatever. So it's possible to do something like this well.
Yeah.
But it's really, really hard and kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
D&D is, like you said, it's the game where you can do anything.
Right.
So to have a DM tell you can't do this, that sucks.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel good as a player. Now, again, there's ways to do it. There's ways that a DM, like there are times where it's worked, but that doesn't mean that it should happen. I think a lot of DMs think it's gonna work. They think it's gonna be fun, but for the players, in most cases, it's not.
Yeah.
We kind of talked about this on our second episode where we were talking about giving an enemy abilities that a player can't counter.
Right.
It's just, that's something that is hard. It's hard to do well. And a lot of players are just not going to appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not as many players are going to be accepting to loss because they don't want to, because it's not fun.
Yeah.
And if a DM is really stubborn in that they want this to happen this certain way, they might go beyond the rules. And if a player knows the rules well enough, might notice that. And that can cause some issues. One idea I had that maybe helps this a little, that helps to do something like this a little bit, is to possibly get your players invested in the enemy.
Okay.
In some way, whether it be, whether it could be that the situation that they're in is an NPC that they've gotten to know and love in some way, has turned against them, or is doing something that they shouldn't be doing, and so so they want to stop this person, but the situation calls for them to maybe their only few options are to kill them, or to let a third party take them away or something like that. Mm-hmm. So that if they lose this encounter, basically the guy gets away or something like that, it's bad, they failed, but that person that they have this relationship with got away and lives. Sure. So maybe they have a little bit more time to figure out what they're going to do about it.
Yeah. So I think if you can make it so that so the players know, even if they fail, there's still some good that's going to come out of their failing. If you can get the player, I don't know exactly how you would get the players to understand that.
Yeah.
But if you start off with that as a goal, that might allow you to come up with some sort of an outcome that the players will like a little bit better.
And with multiple players, that can be tricky because some players might see that loss as okay, and others might see that as no, that we can't do that.
Yeah.
A paladin won't let this guy get away, whereas the wizard might say no, he's working on his, he's doing what's good for him. It's understandable. Mm-hmm. We're gonna try and stop him, but if he gets away, that's him doing that's him surviving his own way or something like that. So,
sure.
So it could, you could cause, that would be some inter-party conflict in a
ding,
way.
Ding, ding.
Ding, 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 ding.
I would say for this, probably, I have a piece of advice I've gotten from somewhere else that I'll say in just a minute. But if you're going to do something like this, I would say do not make it so that the players have to lose.
Sure.
Maybe you can try to make the encounter so hard that they probably will lose. I think there's nothing inherently wrong about that, because I don't remember which book it was in, or even if it was in or what even edition it was in, but there have been D&D books that have given some sort of a guideline that it's of the encounters that the players have, there's this percentage that they should be able to win easily, this percentage they should be able to win with a tough fight, and then this percentage that they should not be able to win, or should be, statistically speaking, too hard for them to win. Uh-huh. I think that if you want there to be a precedent that not all fights are winnable, that's fine. But you have to get that across to your players early on.
Yeah.
You don't want to spring that on them halfway through the campaign and then be like, I never said you'd be able to win. No, that's a bad attitude to have.
Sure.
But so don't ever plan for the only outcome to be that the players lose, because then you'll run into a situation where a player will come up with an idea that you didn't think of that should work, And then you'll have to just be like, it doesn't work because it just doesn't.
Yeah, because reasons.
And that is never something that you want to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like that right there tells anybody who's paying attention that this is not meant to be fair. And, D&D, whether it is fair or not, feels fair most of the time. And that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, that's why they put all the work into the rules to help balance it out and keep it as fair and fun.
Exactly. So don't ever have the plan B that the only solution is for the players to fail. I would say, like I said, make the fight really hard if you want to, but make sure that, number one, there is some sort of an indication that the players aren't completely screwed if they lose. Mm-hmm. Like, let's say you take one player down to 0 hit points. Don't have them roll death saves. Maybe say that the enemy didn't kill them. It knocked them out.
Sure.
That can still be bad, but the players might realize, oh, if I die, I don't have to immediately roll a new character.
Right.
So if
give them like a safety net, which can sort of bring them out of the game. But,
maybe,
but I think it might be better than like bringing them out of the game by like forcing, like, by making up rules or forcing a loss.
Right, and that's something that you can signpost earlier on too. Maybe have encounters earlier in the campaign.
Oh, sure,
where the players get knocked unconscious and don't have to roll death saves because the enemies at that time had another reason not to kill them.
Okay, yeah.
Because then the players will have it in their heads, oh, going to 0 hit points doesn't always mean I'm dead.
Sure, yeah.
So if there is a precedent for some enemies not wanting to kill the players, just like we've talked about how you should encourage the players to have a reason not to kill the enemies.
Right, yeah.
If you can do that for the enemies as well, then that can go really, really far for getting your players to accept when they know that a fight is about to go south. So, like I said, if you're going to do something like this, number one, make sure that the players have some kind of an indication that maybe they're not all about to die.
Mm-hmm.
And then number two, have a plan in case they win.
Sure.
There have been a lot of video games where there is a way to win these unwinnable battles. Like, as an example, Final Fantasy II, the Japanese Final Fantasy II, never came out in America, starts off with it immediately starts with the player characters in a fight with these enemies that they cannot beat. So they start this fight, the enemies beat them, and then they like wake up in a hospital bed or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to hack into the game and give your characters super high stats, you can win, but then they just wake up in the hospital bed the same way as if they had lost.
Sure.
So like a lot of games do not have another possible outcome in the case of a scripted failure. It's just, if you somehow succeed, well, the game goes on as if you lost anyway.
Right, yeah.
Speaking of video games, one game that I just want to give as an example of people having an issue with scripted failures is Dark Souls. Sorry to bring up Dark Souls again, but in the very first game, what got me into the series was that it was challenging but fair.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one point in Dark Souls that a lot of people feel is not fair because there is a scripted failure in that game.
Okay.
And you go into this fight, it looks for all intents and purposes like a normal boss fight, but then this thing, if you try to attack the boss, if you're able to hit him, you realize that anytime you hit him, his health just refills. And then he kills you. And instead of starting back off at the bonfire that you last rested at, you start off at a new bonfire, which is in like a special area that you cannot warp out of.
Huh.
And a lot of people have issue with that, partly because the game so far had been fair.
Mm-hmm.
If you got into a situation, like, there was always a way out. And not only that, but also in that case, it's possible to lose some of the resources that you had gotten so far and no way to get them back.
Sure, yeah.
Or at least very, very, very difficult to get them back.
Yeah.
And so with this boss, a lot of people really had problems with that because, like, you might use up resources in that fight that you were saving because maybe you didn't have much difficulty, and then you get into this unwinnable fight and you're like, oh crap, I have to use up this super powerful healing thing. Bam. And then you find out later, it was a scripted failure and I wasted those items.
Right.
So a lot of people take exception to that, and that's, it's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
So although that is a misstep, depending on how you feel about it, that's probably a misstep. That game also does another quote unquote scripted failure really, really well. At the very beginning of the game, the first boss you encounter, you have no way of damaging. Like you have nothing but a broken sword. When you first encounter him and you run up and attack him, you'll do like a tiny sliver of his health. Meanwhile, he does like half your health in a single hit. So a lot of players, I'm sure, get to that first boss and then they're like, oh crap. And then they die and they're like, oh, this game's stupid. And then they give up on it.
Yeah, I've definitely done that.
But if you go into that fight, if instead of fighting the boss, you look at your surroundings, you realize there is a door you can escape from. So you are not meant to beat that boss. You can just go and you can just run straight through and escape the room. And then come back later when you do have a weapon that is capable of dealing real damage to him. And then you feel really victorious when that happens. But the game presents it as a failure, but there is always a way out.
Right.
So that's an important thing to keep in mind if you're going to play in something like this.
And even still, like, you can beat him.
You can.
In that, you can't, like, with the broken weapon, you can do it.
It takes so long, but you can do it.
Yeah, it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of patience and timing and skill at the game, but you can kill him.
And you get a special reward for doing so.
Sure, yeah.
It's not a great reward. It's a weapon that you can't use for a very, very long time, and once you're finally able to use it, it's not even that great of a weapon. But hey, it's something.
Yeah, it's still like a status thing, you know.
Yeah, it's an item you cannot get except by doing that.
Right. So it's a trophy, it's a reward, you know. At the very least you could say I did that.
Exactly.
Even if you never use it, you still have it in your inventory and say I did that thing.
Yeah. So that's an example of like it's, you know, it is a scripted failure, but there's a way out, and if you are able to succeed, the game says, "Hey, good job."
Yeah.
So those are things that you should keep in mind. Now, just one more quick thing before we move on to the next question. I was listening to another podcast, Hardy Dice Friends. They, similar podcast to ours.
Yes.
We've mentioned them in the past. They said on another episode, it wasn't this exact situation, but they were saying, if you're going to run an encounter where the bad guy is meant to get away, that's a very similar thing.
Yeah.
Players don't like it because that means that they aren't allowed to make any of the decisions that decide what happens.
Sure.
If you're going to run an encounter where the bad guy is meant to get away, they suggested just tell your players, I want the bad guy to get away.
Huh.
I mean, yeah, it breaks a little bit of the illusion.
Sure.
But then the players can try to make the best of that, knowing that they are ultimately going to fail. They at least know, okay, well, let's make this really fun regardless.
Right. My immediate thought was like, okay, if he's going to get away, maybe there's something we can do to like make it easier to find him, or like,
sure.
I'm trying to think of an example. The only thing that popped in my mind is in the Monster Hunter series, there's these like paintball things that you basically tag the monster.
Sure.
And it makes it so that you can track them later.
Okay.
Because a lot of the bigger ones, like you'll fight them and get their health down, and then they'll run away, and like you have to chase them down, and sometimes they'll hide. So
yeah.
Like a spell or something that somebody can put on, or like or I don't know, if you manage to wound them in a way that makes them bleed, you can, maybe the ranger in the group has a easier time of tracking them or something.
A couple episodes ago when we were talking about called shots, you did mention like, oh, I want to give the guy a scar.
Yeah.
So that I can more easily spot him later, unless he's surrounded by a group of 20 commoners. Right. So that's something that like, if I were to say to the group, you know, hey, I want this enemy to get away, and a player said, okay, I want to do that, I would say, all right, and I'll work that into how you encounter him the next time.
Yeah.
So again, it will take away some of the magic, but if you told the players, I want you guys to lose this fight, and I'm playing the paladin, I'm going to freaking go down gloriously. Sure. I'm going to go down swinging that weapon the whole time, and I'm going to feel much better about it than if it was forced upon me without my knowledge.
I feel like announcing it, at least in the right way, it does kind of play into like making the players... having the players be invested in the bad guy or something in some way, because like if you're basically including the players in the storytelling in some way, because you're like, hey, I want this guy to get away, like he's gonna try to escape from it, like, you know, like what can we do about this? So like at that point they're involved in the storytelling in some way, so they're a little bit more invested in that bad guy getting away. Therefore, when it happens, it's like, it's still kind of their win because they helped that happen. Yeah. They got to help something cool happen. I mean, not everybody's going to go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wouldn't want to do this often.
Sure. Right.
But you know, if that's something that you want to happen in order to make the story better, and you can explain that to the players, I think a mature group of players would be willing to at least try it out.
Yeah.
And if they don't like it, they'll tell you afterwards, I didn't really like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, a few ideas there. Hopefully, something good can come from that.
Yeah.
Now, before we go to the next question, I just want to take a brief moment and I want to direct everybody to Crit Academy. It's another podcast that we are associated with.
Yes.
We're both part of the Crit Nation Fellowship.
Yes.
So check them out, critacademy.com. They make, every episode they have new and reusable content that everybody can make use of. Players, DMs, they're really good.
Mm-hmm.
We will hopefully be playing an actual game of D&D with them pretty soon.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm excited.
And then I also want to tell everybody to go to audibletrial.com/conflict. Get yourself a free audiobook. You can get a free month of their service. And then, like I said, one audiobook comes with that. If you continue the service, you get another one every month, or you can just cancel it and have that free audiobook. Didn't cost you anything and you'll have it forever.
Yep.
So,
and then during that free month, you can shop any of their other audiobooks and you get a discount as well.
Yeah. Once again, audibletrial.com/conflict. They have tons of titles. I'll even mention, I read a couple of the Dragonlance novels a while back. I just checked. They do have those on Audible.
Nice.
So if you ever wanted to listen to some of the, novels about a popular D&D campaign setting, they've got them on there.
Awesome. All right. Our next question comes from DM Jack. This was through email.
And DM Jack is actually, he came to our live show.
Yes.
So we met him in person. He's a great guy.
Yeah. He asks, DM screens, what is your opinion on them? Also, when should the DM roll out in the open, and when and how should you keep certain roles a secret?
Sure. I think I've mentioned on the podcast before. If not, I'll just say it again. I do not use a DM screen. Like I feel like I did when I first started DMing, but I have not for a very, very long time. And I've mentioned our friend Chris. Yeah. Real Chris, not Tennessee Chris. I've mentioned that when I started playing with them, I noticed that they made all their roles out in the open. And as a DM who got my start fudging a lot of stuff, that blew my mind. Because before I had felt like every single role had to be curated by me to make sure that it was acceptable for the group.
Right.
And that made me realize oh no, I don't have to do that at all. And then number one, that made the game more exciting for me as well as I'm sure for the players. And number two, it made it less stressful because when something bad happened, I didn't have to think is this my fault because I didn't fudge this die?
Right.
So I don't use a DM screen for that reason because I think that it encourages fudging, and I'm of the opinion that fudging is a slippery slope, and it's hard to do it but not do it too much.
Sure.
So I think that not using a DM screen is going to discourage you from fudging, but also if you think of it this way, a DM screen, you are literally putting a wall between you and the players.
Right, yeah. It's an actual physical barrier.
Exactly. So if that's not there, it's easier to have a more you feel like you are all part of the group. Everybody is right there face to face. And so I like that feeling.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of DMs that like, that sort of power of being the DM. And so having your little layer and
sure.
have your secrets and everything like that. There's definitely a draw to that. I get that. But I mean, as an overall experience, having everybody on the same, on the same level kind of helps it out.
Yeah. If one person, I understand the DM is different than the rest of the players. He does put in a lot of work and he has a lot more control.
Sure.
But if he's up sitting on a throne somewhere, everybody is going to feel oh, well, he's different than me. I can't be like the DM. I'm just a player.
Right.
Whereas if everybody is on the same physical level, then it feels more oh, we're all making this story together. Yeah.
This kind of ties into the last question where it in a situation where the DM is trying to, for story purposes, making the players lose, having the barrier up, having the DM screen up, and if you're trying to make the players lose and you're fudging dice rolls to do so,
right, that
can create some issues.
The worst thing is if a player suspects the DM of manipulating the dice rolls, it can feel like that DM has kind of breached this agreement between the DM and the players. We all agreed to abide by these rules. And if a DM is taking such a heavy-handed stance on changing that, that can kind of suck as the player.
Right. Because I think, we've talked about fudging before, but it should be that the reason that you're hiding your roles is to make sure that the players can't determine the exact number of things.
That's true.
So the DM rolls an attack roll for the monster, and the DM knows the AC of the player.
Mm-hmm.
So if they rolled an 18 and managed to hit just barely,
then the player would know, oh, okay, he's got this modifier.
he's got this modifier, or he needed to roll really high just to hit me. So I know I'm okay. I'm going to be mostly okay on this guy. This guy might not be that big of a problem.
Right.
But not knowing that can be like, it's like, oh my gosh, this guy's a threat. Like and then that goes into talking about like hit points and stuff like that, whether or not hit points should be kept by the players or by the DMs to kind of hide like how much damage is this guy doing.
Sure.
But
so I definitely acknowledge that there is some value in keeping roles and such secret from the players. Like I'm not trying to say that that's not a thing.
Right.
But in general, I feel like the openness, in my opinion, the openness is better as a whole than that, that extra level of mystery or whatever.
Yeah, that kind of goes to what Hardy Dice Friends was saying, like being more open about it, about like hey, I want this guy to get away. Like when you're on the same level and you're kind of more open to sharing everything with the players feel more part of the storytelling, therefore are more accepting of things like losing and all that.
Sure. Yeah, so like there is definitely value to DM screens. Mm-hmm. I like the idea of having like a thing that you can quickly look at that has charts and stuff on it, or NPC names. I think that's really cool. And like, if I were to use a DM screen, that's what I would use it for. Yeah,
it's a nice little like a billboard. You put sticky notes on it. Most of the ones that you can buy have like charts and graphs and everything on them.
So they can be really cool, but like again, I don't use one for the reasons that I've stated.
Sure.
Now, that the fact that I don't use one can be a bit of an obstacle, because I do understand there are times where you don't want the players to know what you're rolling. You may not even want your players to know that you are rolling.
Right, yeah.
So, the easiest example, let's say the players are walking along and there is somebody hiding in the bushes.
Yeah.
If you tell the players, make a perception check.
Yeah.
They're going to know something is there. They won't necessarily know somebody's hiding, but like they're going to know, oh, there's something that I didn't see.
Right.
I can understand, like, it is hard not to metagame sometimes. So just, if there's a way that you can make it so that the player doesn't even have the option of metagaming, that's better.
And I think they've definitely attempted to kind of fix something like that with like the passive like perceptions.
That's true.
Things. And that's something that you could keep on the other side of your DM screen, so that it's not something that they know that you're looking at.
Right.
So you're not like glancing at their character sheet or glancing at your notepad that clearly has their
exactly
thing on it. So you can just kind of look over at your screen.
You like lean your head over and they see you peering down at passive perception. So and just one thing, I'll just say a lot of people, I don't think a lot of people use passive perception right.
Sure.
I've seen a lot of discussion on the 5th edition board about people say like, oh, well, if my passive perception is 15, then that means that I cannot ever miss a trap that is under 15 no matter what. And like, I think that's kind of getting a bit beyond what passive perception is meant to do. Huh. But anyway, so there are times where you don't want the players to know that they're even making a check. So what are some ways to do that? Again, when I started playing with Chris and that group, one thing that they did, which isn't necessarily the perfect option, but it is a good enough option for a lot of people. Make a bunch of rolls ahead of time, write them all down in order, and then have that just as part of your papers. When you need one of the players to make a check, instead of saying make a check, just scratch the next number off. And then when the next person makes a check, scratch that number off too. And then, some people might argue about whether or not that's fair or whether it's random or whatever. I mean, I don't think that there is any reason to argue this except when you fail to check and you don't want to have failed to check. Like, I think the only reason to object to this is just when the play. I mean, I guess it takes a little bit of the agency away from the player because they're not the one rolling the dice or whatever, but just play the game. If you trust your DM to have actually made a roll and not just made a decision of whether you fail or not. If you trust your DM, I think you should be fine with the DM making a bunch of rolls ahead of time and then doing that. And in fact, I don't even think when I play with Chris, I don't think they would even actually make rolls. They would just like open up a spreadsheet and just have it generate a bunch of random numbers and then just have just a big giant block of random numbers and just scratch them off. But the purpose of this is that, again, you don't have to ask the player to make a check. If they just see you making something in your notes, just making a little check or whatever, they don't know what that is.
Yeah, it could be anything.
Exactly. And so, that can be a good enough option. However, if you're, I guess I sometimes do this, but like if you tend to overthink things, you as the DM might, when you check off one of the numbers, you might notice, oh, the next number is a failure. And then you might subconsciously try to manipulate the situation so that the next time you need to make a check for somebody, it's a soft failure. So like it's something that doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You have to have some level of self-control when you do this. So this isn't the perfect option.
Yeah. One idea I came up with was like have a like on the inside of the DM screen, you have like a little pouch and you put a bunch of like pieces of paper with numbers on them. And then like you can draw from it. So that way it's like, it's still random, but you don't know what's coming next and that sort of thing. And then you just put it back in and shuffle them again or something like that.
And the players won't know that you're grabbing a piece of paper out of a pouch because, it won't make a sound. Hopefully.
Or here's another idea. Always have a deck of cards on you.
Okay.
And just like be like make it so like all the people and all your friends and your family and everything make like you're just that guy who has a deck of cards and he just fiddles with cards all the time or something like that. Yeah, you're just that kind of guy. You go to the casino or something and you're just always shuffling some cards or something. But really, what's on those cards is numbers between 1 and 20. And then you can draw one of those cards as your random, but no one will be the wiser because they're like, he's always playing with those cards.
Sure.
This is a very elaborate way to go about it, but
you just gave me an idea. I think it would be neat if you could buy a deck of cards that was only like 20 cards, but they were all numbers. Like each one was like, this one is 19, this one is whatever. And then you could just grab one, flip it over. That wouldn't make a sound. And then you would have your number. But then I realized you would basically have to reshuffle it every time you drew one.
That's why you spend years of your life convincing everybody that you're just that guy who carries around
always shuffling some cards.
Shuffling cards. It's just it's like a nervous twitch sort of thing. It's like, oh, he just shuffles cards. It's kind of annoying, but it's kind of quirky. So we're kind of okay with it. But really, it's so that you can have secret dice rolls,
I guess. If you are the kind of a DM or whatever that has like a computer open with your notes and stuff on it, you could just have a random dice generator on there. And then just whenever you need one, just, if you have like a little trackpad on your computer, just tap on it and give you another random number.
Yeah, and we're in the days of like smartphones and
oh yeah, of course. See, sorry, I'm the guy that doesn't have a smartphone, so that's not where my mind immediately went.
I still have to describe that to people sometimes. So it's like when you were coming to the Ren Fest and like I opened up my phone to like text you to see where you were and I'm like, oh, that's not a thing that can happen. It's like I'd have to call him, and that's not the easiest thing to do in a crowd. So
sure, yeah, I'm sorry. Every time I need to get hold of you, I would call you.
No, that's perfectly fine. It's not that's not a problem. It's just always like a oh right.
Sure. One time when I was at work, I was training on this one job. This was a while ago, and the guy that was training me, he said something about oh yeah, like hey, let me show you something on your phone, and I was like, oh, I don't have a smartphone. And he was like, well, what do you have? And I showed him my phone. He was like, what do you do with it? I was like, oh, I make calls. I make and receive phone calls. Yeah. So yeah.
It's got a calculator on it, maybe?
Right. It does. Okay. Calculator and a sound recorder.
Oh yeah. And an alarm.
I have an amazing alarm on there. Maybe I'll put it on here as a after the credits thing or something. Anyway. So yeah, if you have a smartphone, that's probably a really, really easy situation, really easy solution. You just have a dice roller open up on your smartphone, and then whenever you need to make a roll, just tap that.
Which I'm 100% sure that there are apps that like there are plenty of D&D like assistant apps or something that have like dice rollers and like health counters and stuff like that to keep track of things like that.
Yeah. So if you need to make a roll in secret, that's probably the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. All right, our next question comes from Gossip Golem. This was an email sent to us. They ask, rolling stats versus point buy, or how do you make most of playing a low stat character, especially when another character has higher stats?
Yes. Now, for a long time, I've used just point buy because, we rolled stats for a long, long time. And I was always the player who I once, just to see if I could get an 18 in something, I once had to roll like 20 sets before I had a single 18 in a single stat.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have a problem with playing a low stat character.
Sure.
It is definitely possible, and for some people, even relatively easy to have a great time playing a low stat character. I'm not trying to say that low stats cannot be fun.
Right.
However, like we were saying with our first question today, failing on a dice roll isn't fun. Or at least most of the time, it is less fun than succeeding.
Yeah.
Most of the time, succeeding on a roll is more fun than failing.
Right.
That's just how the game is. When you succeed on something, you get that little dopamine hit in your head that tells you something cool just happened. So it is inherently more fun to have high stats because that means you have a higher chance of succeeding on more rolls. Doesn't mean that you can't have fun with low stats, but the person with high stats is going to have an easier time having a good time than a player with low stats.
Yeah.
So although I'm fine with playing a low stat character, if I'm playing the low stat character sitting next to a high stat character, it's going to get annoying.
Yeah. You're going to have problems.
Right. So ever since, I would say around 4th edition, because 4th edition was the first, I think the first edition that like really, really pushed the point buy system because they had like the character builder and so on.
Yeah.
So ever since 4th edition, I've always used point buy. And even in part of 3rd edition, but mostly 4th edition. So I really like point buy because it just guarantees that everybody is going to be on an even playing field.
Right.
If you want to invest more into one stat, you can, but that means that you're going to suffer in your other stats.
Right. Yeah.
And so, that does make certain builds hard to do. Like in 3rd or 4th edition, it was really hard to play a paladin or a monk.
Right.
Because you needed a lot of high stats. And I think that was a failing of those classes. Those classes kind of got criticized a lot in those editions with good reason. But the alternative is making it so that whoever wants to play a monk is going to have to get really high stats.
Yeah.
And that's got its own set of difficulties. So I don't like rolling for stats as much as I like point buy, because you always get, like, I'm in the 5th edition Facebook group. There's always the guy who's like, hey, so this person showed up at my table with, 4 18s, a 17 and a 15. How do I deal with this? Well, guess what? You don't have that problem with point buy.
Yeah, sure.
Whether they rolled it legit or not.
Right.
There is no suspicion, or at least there probably won't be a suspicion of cheating if someone shows up with a point buy build, because you can probably take one glance at an array and know whether it was legal within point buy or not.
Sure, yeah.
So it just keeps everything fair, makes it so that nobody is wondering whether anybody lied about their rolls when making their character or not. But again, it's just a matter of, if one player is allowed to have more fun because they rolled higher way back at the beginning of the campaign, that kind of sucks as the player who didn't roll so high.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that you can do to permanently make up for those lower rolls. Yeah, you can get like a magic item that gives you a bonus increases one of your stats, but so can the other guy.
Yeah.
If you rolled really low for strength, you can get gauntlets of ogre power that make your strength a 19 or whatever, but so can the other guy, who he may not have a high strength, but he's got a high everything else. He can do that too. I'm not saying anything's wrong with that item. I'm just saying, like, there isn't any way to balance out if one player started the game with low rolls.
Yeah.
So some solutions, a lot of people, when they roll for stats, instead of having everybody just roll their own stats and then that's what you have, a lot of people will say, everybody roll stats. Whoever rolls the best, everyone uses that same set of stats.
Sure.
I think that is probably like the best. If you're going to roll for stats, that's probably the best way to do it, because it just makes sure everybody is on an even playing field.
Yeah. Although part of me that thinks, like, because like a low level stat can be a good time. Like,
it can be, yeah.
Like, yeah, you're a barbarian, then your higher stats are like strength and constitution, and those are the ones you put the high stats into. But you're gonna put your dump stat, your charisma. That's always the stereotypical barbarian is like a bumbling, brute.
Yeah.
So something like, dexterity or charisma or intelligence are going to be on the low side because you don't necessarily need them as a barbarian.
Right.
So it's always like the fun, lovable brute that doesn't know how to talk to people, but knows his way around an axe,
Sure.
So that can be fun. So if you use the array that if you use something that, the stats that somebody rolled and it's really good,
mm-hmm.
then like you have less of that happening, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely am fine with, like, I love the idea of having like 1 or 2 stats that are just comically low.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that makes a more interesting character. I would rather play a character with 118 and 13
sure.
than a character that has all 18s.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that would make a more challenging character and also just a more interesting character.
Yeah.
So yeah, just rolling for stats. It sucks when you're the player that rolls lower. It's possible to have fun, but it is inherently going to be more work.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you let your players roll for stats, then you are forcing, or if your players want to roll stats, some of them are forcing themselves to work harder to have as good of a time.
Yeah.
Because they can't rely on whether they succeed or not to give them that, little shot of excitement in their head. They have to make it themselves, which is something that the player with high stats doesn't have to do.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do it, that's fine. But if you have to do it, that's not fine.
Yeah. And I think there's other ways to try and kind of beef up the odds a bit.
Yeah.
I want to say it because it's usually like you roll 4, you take away the lowest one or something like that.
Yeah, roll 46, drop the lowest one.
Yeah, or like you can make it roll 5 and drop the lowest 2, so you have like more chances of getting better rolls.
Yeah.
Or you can say or you can re-roll ones or something.
Yeah,
like that.
we've had that in a lot of our groups.
Yeah, so something like that kind of like that makes it so you have a less likely chance to get a really low stat, better odds, so that there's less likely that somebody's going to get screwed over.
Yeah.
At the very least, they're going to get at least one decent stat, more than likely.
Right.
So they can, that way they can put that into the stat that they need for their class, and so they're not going to be failing all the time.
Yeah, I think what we did when we ran the Age of Worms thing, it's been a long time since I mentioned Age of Worms. When we ran the Age of Worms campaign, I think what we did was I had you guys roll for stats, but then I looked at each of your stats and I made one of your stats an 18. It wasn't necessarily going to be your highest stat.
Oh, sure.
It wasn't necessarily going to be your lowest stat. I looked at them and then, if somebody had a problem with it, I would be willing to reconsider that.
Sure.
I would choose one of their stats to make into an 18. But that was a very specific case, and it was 3 players. And again, like I said, if anybody didn't like what I did, they could talk to me about it.
It'd probably be like a cool way to like put that into the story too, like the characters were like touched by like a divine power or something like that.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
It's like everybody gets an 18 in a random stat, but it's because of the deity that they might follow or something like that.
Sure.
Or one that they don't follow, but like are gonna learn about later on or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was Kios who did it. I don't know.
Ooh, maybe
he wanted a worthy opponent or something. I don't know.
I guess. Just one more thing, like if you want to make the most of playing a low stat character, try to role play more. That's kind of kind of a little cop out. Like, oh well, my character has low charisma, but I'm still just gonna talk like a high charisma person or whatever.
Sure.
A lot of some people don't like that.
I mean, you could play off a low charisma, like
definitely. That I would say low charisma can be fun to role play, but I think low wisdom is probably the one that I've had the most fun.
Okay, yeah,
because playing the oblivious character can be
right. Yeah,
it can be a source of fun. There was one time I had a character that had a 6 wisdom. I rolled a spot check. This was 3rd edition. I rolled a spot check and got a 0. I found my foot. I was looking for that. There it is.
Shoot. Found it.
Yeah. So, just find a way to, whatever your like lowest stats are, think of some cool role-playing quirk that can come from that. If you have a really low dexterity, be constantly dropping stuff like your great uncle's inkwell.
Sure.
Or low constitution, you are always sick.
Sure. Yeah. Always like sneezing or coughing or something like that. And I mean, at least in 5th edition, the DM can help with this a bit by giving you a little bit more inspiration
Maybe.
So like, try to play to your flaws and things like that.
That's a good idea.
To give you an excuse, to give you an inspiration, so that.
And then that can make up for the fact that you're going to be failing more rolls. Well, you have. You're going
to be having advantage
more.
maybe more often than other people would.
Yeah.
So that's a way to maybe kind of help balance it out.
Yeah, maybe that's a neat idea. I think that's something worth trying out.
There's like a house rule that like if your total stat number is under a certain amount, you can have up to 2 inspiration.
Ooh, there you go. I mean, there are rules on like if your stats don't add up to a certain amount, you can just re-roll your whole thing.
Oh, that's true.
But even still, you have to have pretty low stats. I'm talking like if let's say you have like all 12s and 13s. That's not terrible. You are still above the average commoner.
Yeah, you're still positives.
The guy who has like 15s and 16s is going to outshine you.
Yeah.
And like that can be annoying.
Sure.
So.
But yeah, maybe it could be whoever has the lowest stats in the group gets has an extra inspiration slot, and the inspiration can be shifted to other people. Like when you when you have inspiration, you can give it to other characters, to other players. And so, like, if you're the guy with the lowest stats, but you got the extra inspiration, you get to dish those out and make friends.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's neat. I think that's a neat solution to that.
Cool.
All right. Well, I think we're going to take a moment here. Let's take a deep breath. Relax. Let's remember the people who have come before us, people who may have met their end too early in order to make the world better for all of us.
Or just met their end in a ridiculous way.
Yeah, no, there's that too. As we toss another log onto the funeral pyre. This is a short one. It was submitted by Reddit user Horrorifying.
Okay.
And Horrorifying says, this was back in 4th edition. I was playing a Kenku Ranger who is a pirate captain. I thought you might like this.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
The whole premise of the campaign was that we were a pirate crew.
Nice.
So my Kenku, Cantus Barnabas Bethelsazar. I think it's supposed to be Balthazar, but it's so it is spelled incorrect. It's spelled differently. Anyway, so my Kenku, Cantus Barnabas Bethelsazar, was an inspiring and really fun character concept I put together. On our first adventure, my first mate crit failed and shot me in the eye during a fight with a skeleton boss.
Oh no.
I went down. Then when my team tried to drag me to safety, there were 3 critical fails. Then 2 critically failed death saves later, Cantus just gave up.
Oh no.
That was the first time I found out that my dice don't like me. So we're going to raise our glass in memory of Cantus Barnabas Bethelsazar, the Kenku Ranger who angered the random number gods and met his end too early. Well, I think that will do it for today. To submit questions for us to discuss, items for the Dragon's Hoard, or stories for the funeral pyre, email us at interpartyconflict@gmail.com. For show notes, a running list of questions asked, and important links, go to interpartyconflict.com. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/interpartyconflict, or our subreddit at reddit.com/r/interpartyconflict, where I post weekly discussion questions for you. We are also on Twitter at InPartyConflict. We're also on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, YouTube, anywhere you download podcasts. Please rate, review, and subscribe, or just tell a friend. If you feel like donating, we have a PayPal donate button on our website. Anything you can give us would go towards making the podcast better. Jeff, do you want to tell us about FriendQuest?
FriendQuest is our gameplay YouTube channel. We'll play some video games, play some D&D arcade games. We'll be putting up Gauntlet on there. If anybody has any suggestions for games that Gabe and I might play, I'll do my best to try and locate them if I don't own them.
Sure.
They can send me an email at thefriendquest@gmail.com.
That's awesome. All right. You can also head over to audibletrial.com/conflict. Get yourself a free audiobook. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from. I guarantee you can find something you like 100% for free. And our music is made by Boxcat Games from Nameless the Hacker's RPG.
Well, Gabe, until next time.
Try switching things up sometimes.
There you go.
This is the alarm on my phone. Thought you might appreciate that.